Hi, my name is Brennan Gravely, and this is me final project. I'm choosing to do it in this kind of monologue style form because I feel like I can be the most open ended and honest about how I feel about everything we've learned in this course. So I'll get started. To begin, I want to talk about the personal assessments. The first one I used was Chapter 1, the Generalized Problematic Internet Use, where I achieved a low score. I got rid of social media about 6 months ago, so I wasn't really surprised that I received a low score, but I did find that the times that I did use social media, I probably could have had a score on the higher end because a lot of the issues that I was dealing with is the reason I don't have social media today. Overuse, relying on it for conversation. The next personal assessment I used was from Chapter 3, which talked about disclosure online versus face to face. For online disclosure and depth of online disclosure, I had a 2 and a 3. But for face to face, I had a 4 and a 5 in regular disclosure and depth. So if I'm revealing anything to peers and family, it's mostly going to be conducted in person. But even then, I'm pretty held back in the way I express myself. So it didn't really surprise me to see those results. In terms of empathy, I chose that assessment for Chapter 4, where I had a slightly higher score achieved of 49. I tried to be as honest as I could with myself, but I found that a lot of the answers I gave really required no kind of critical thinking, if you will. It felt really impulsive to act one way or the other. I feel like I'm generally pretty caring, and it was very instinctual to either give a 5 or a 0 with the occasional 1 or 4. I also used the nonverbal immediacy scale score, where I achieved a 51, which was above average for men. For most questions regarding vocal inflections or gestures, I was like generally a 5 because my culture, as I learned early on in this course through an assignment, is very animated in conversation. My mother and father are Peruvian, and so is my grandmother, so it wasn't really surprising to see that I was on that side of the scale for most of it. And I also finally used Chapter 8's Variance of Emotional Intelligence, where my scores varied. I found that I had a 13 on the interpersonal and interpersonal, but an 11 and a 10 on adaptability and stress management. So my scores were generally on the higher end, but they started to lean off towards adaptability and stress management. I feel like sometimes I can be a bit of a control freak with the way I conduct my life. I'm very organized, so it didn't really surprise me to see that a lot of times my stress and my ability to adapt to situations isn't the best. Moving on to concepts and reflection of concepts, snap judgments and stereotyping from Chapter 4, Perceiving Others. I feel like it's something that appears a lot in our conversations and on social media. It's easy for us to put people into a certain image, as nowadays through social media we try to create certain images, and we meet people or we see people, and it's much easier for us nowadays to assume certain things about people or put them to a certain box. We're very polarized even in our politics nowadays, that we feel we have to be on one side or the other. Also from Chapter 4, we assume others are like us. I feel like this mindset is quite common. Making assumptions about the paradigms of our peers can lead to problems within our relationships. I feel like it's something that still happens in my own life. It's hard for me still to this day to stop myself from sharing something without thinking about how the other person might perceive it, or how it might affect them, or maybe they don't think on the same plane as I do, or maybe it might offend them. Moving on, nonverbal communication, which is probably my favorite chapter. I'm kind of using this as a concept for a couple things. It was just incredibly interesting to me how ambiguous, how constant it was, and how it can be shaped by culture and gender. It has so much variety in it, and even then, it's 90% of our conversation. A lot of people like to say conversations are only 10% of what we actually say, and 90% of how we carry ourselves, how we act. And even then, a lot of it occurs behind the curtain. It's subconscious. In the same breath, the next concept, understanding each method of nonverbal communication: touch, body movement, distance. You think of distance and body movement, a lot of that is things that are occurring subconsciously. We're not thinking about how far we are away from someone. We're not thinking about our body movement. For me, gestures like this happen constantly, and I don't even think about it. It happened to me when I was practicing for this assignment, so that was very interesting to see. And also listening responses from Chapter 7, the types we have, how often we use each, and which method is most appropriate based on the situation. It was really incredible for me to see how much variety there is within the meaning of listening, all the way from silent listening to direct advising. It's interesting to look at how each type of listening response can be used by different people in different situations. And I'll get into that with applications of how some situations it might be better to sit back and listen if it's an important moment or if it's business inspired. But there are other situations where people seek our advice and help. So, moving on to applications from Chapter 8, recognizing the difference between feeling and acting. This taught me to be aware of when to act on my feelings versus choosing maybe to hold them inside. Also, choosing to share our feelings with different kinds of expression and emotion. I feel like there are times we can be frustrated or angry and we want to share it, but it might not be the best situation. Or there are times when we could be sad or upset, and we don't share, and we should be sharing it with people who care about us because they want to help us. So I think there are times where we just have to assess our feelings and know when to act. And then Chapter 7, which response type to use. I feel like this demonstrated which type of response to me that should be used based on a situation. So, of course, we have silent listening, questioning, paraphrasing, empathizing, supporting, analyzing, evaluating, and advising from one side to the other. Like I said before, in silent listening, questioning, paraphrasing, that might be someone sharing something important or personal with us, or we're having a business interaction and it's time for us to take in information. Or maybe there are times where we're exchanging with a friend and they want advice, or maybe they're seeking that support. That's when we evaluate, advise, we analyze. So that was interesting to look at. And that's something I want to apply in my own life with family, friends, so I can be a better communicator. In the same breath, avoiding poor listening habits. I feel like selective listening is something we all do and we try to correct, especially with our phones now all in our face. It's hard for us with our attention all over the place to pay attention and hear everything that a person is giving to us. So choosing to hear what you want to hear, I feel like it's hard for us to be able to take in everything and respond without having a biased opinion. But working towards that is something that's important to me, and getting to a higher level of communication, which I feel like this course has done for me. With defensive listening as well, being able to receive criticism with an open tone rather than acting in an offended manner. Moving on to managing impressions. This for me is huge because in my culture, manners and appearance is incredibly important, especially when meeting someone for the first time. This obviously is important in the work world where a lot of your first impressions will be super impactful in the way you move through your career. So having good manners, being respectful, being well put together is something that is rarely talked about, I feel like, nowadays with our developing culture, but it's still important in the workplace. And even with our friends, meeting someone for the first time, it can develop your friendship and it can even spark one. The skills of perception checking from Chapter 4, slowing down my snap judgments and assumptions of people and following the STEP guideline. That was provided in the textbook, which talks about description of behavior, 2 possible interpretations of the behavior, and asking for clarity. I feel like this method can be used in friendships to not harm or offend peers and also family. It can also be used with coworkers and even upper-level management in order to not instigate those who have power over us in the workplace. Because if you demonstrate poor tone and you're disrespectful, you probably will not receive the desired response. And finally, an application that I hope to use is the self-fulfilling prophecy. Understanding how some self-fulfilling prophecies can be beneficial, but others can harm us depending on the situation. So having positive affirmations in our jobs, academics, or sports can help develop, in the right way, confidence and move forward in our careers. But also, in the same breath, believing that others act a certain way based on your beliefs can be harmful. And what we create in our own minds is not parallel with how others may think or behave, in most situations at least. Having that cognitive awareness in that sense can promote our friendships and our workplace environment. And that is all I have. This course has been a ton of fun for me. It's been one of the most exciting and enjoyable courses I've taken thus far. This was a topic that I really enjoyed throughout the summer, and it was definitely a breath of fresh air with everything that's been going on. So I really appreciate everything that's been put together, and thank you. That's all I have. Goodbye.